Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plant, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I am Carol Collins. I'm editor-in-chief at Fine Gardening Magazine.
Hi everybody, I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the editorial director at Fine Gardening. And today, probably the most popular topic in gardening, if I were to say, of the last myriad decades, deer-resistant plants. Now, Carol, this is resistant plants, not deer-proof plants. And why do we not call it deer-proof plants?
Because those little boogers will eat anything if they are hungry enough. I think they would eat poison if they were, I don't know. But yes, there's really nothing that's deer-proof.
Totally do. I mean, I think that we've said it before, we'll say it again. They eat mountain laurel, which is actually toxic. And I will say we have about 2 feet of snow here in February in New England. And the only thing that's green outside of my window is mountain laurel, kalmia. And I have seen them nibbling on it. So there you go. There's no such thing as deer-proof plants. But we leaned in because there are plants that really do resist all but the most intense deer pressure and tends to be pungent plants. Those plants with a really crunchy, unappetizing texture. What are other characteristics you looked for your deer-resistant plants?
Sometimes with a strong smell, you know, that they can smell from farther away.
Fuzz.
Yes,
it must give them indigestion or something like that. Yeah, all of those things, but not necessarily ugly plants, you know, by any means.
That's it. They can repel deer without repelling us.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe that's the tagline for the episode. Well, so near and dear to both of our hearts because both of us have tremendous deer pressure in our own gardens. Safe to say?
Safe to say, yes.
Okay.
The trail comes right through, and it probably has for hundreds of years before people were even here.
Yes, exactly. So gardening with deer, I do not have deer fencing. It would be very cost prohibitive in my garden. I have quite a large property, quite a large area that's landscaped. I work for a gardening magazine. I'm not dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars on a deer fence. So I really have to lean into, you know, planting strategies and plants that are deer proof. You are in a similar boat.
I am, but I do have a deer exclusion area, which is an 8-foot tall fence. You really can't go shorter than that if you really want to keep them out. And, you know, it was hundreds, not thousands, and it's probably 20 by 30. So it's a considerable amount of space in there, but not, you know, not too crazy.
And that's primarily where you put your edibles and your annual cut flowers, Carol, or do you have some other goodies in there?
Yeah, I have been experimenting with what I can grow outside the deer fence. And last year I decided the dahlias are going inside. Like they're mostly deer resistant, but what they want to eat are the flowers, which is also what I want. So that's, but by and large, my ornamentals are outside the deer fence and my edibles and cut flowers are inside.
Nice. Yes, I have, my vegetable garden is fenced off. Not quite 8 feet, but about 6.5, 7 feet, something like that. So for the most part, it deters them enough to stay away from that. But okay, so the first plant that came to mind, trying to be deer resistant, was please.
Summer Beauty allium was the first one that I thought of, and
nice.
This is Allium tanguticum, Summer Beauty. It is hardy from zones 4 to 9, so it's like a huge zonal range. And I might have talked about this one before, but it's a good one. And I don't know that I talked about it in the context of being deer resistant, but this is truly a plant that is on the deer trail. Like they walk past it and they, as far as I know, have never touched it. That is, of course, because every part of this plant smells like onions. And when when it's growing, there are lots of other tastier options. And I think that's part of deer resistance is, is there something that they would prefer that you are also growing or that's readily available? But it likes full sun, average to dry, well-drained soil. The plants get about 2 feet tall and wide, and it has a clumping habit. This like sort of, strappy green, blunt-ended, garlic-looking foliage. It blooms from midsummer to late summer for me, this particular variety, Summer Beauty. So the photos that I dropped in the show notes are from the middle and end of July, but it blooms over a period of about a month.
That's pretty incredible for perennial in summer.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very pretty round little 2-inch umbels of lavender pink flowers. And if you're looking for a darker color, our sponsor, Junk Seed, carries Millennium, which is sort of the allium or flowering allium that all others are judged by. I just happen to have Summer Beauty, but Millennium is also a fine choice. And like I said, the flowers are a little deeper color if you don't like that lighter lavender, but I love it. And I really like it with swamp milkweed, which is Asclepias incarnata, which has a cooler sort of lavender pink. And then with the warmer lavender pink, it's almost like that vibrating color difference that I've had people like stop and ask me what these two things are so they could maybe try growing them together. I like it's what I think of as a generous plant. So each gallon that you buy is actually multiple plants in a clump, and you can, especially after a few years in the ground, you can divide them. And I've done that quite successfully. Best time to divide is in early spring after the ground warms up enough so that you can get into it, but before the plants really start growing. And you'll easily see, you sort of can tease the plants apart, then spread them out, and you can cover a lot of area with just basically what started out as a gallon. Mostly untroubled by pests and diseases. Deer leave it alone, of course. The only thing is that overly wet soil, it doesn't love it. It really would prefer dry, well-drained soil.
Nice. And I think, so people get a little hot and bothered when they see this plant because they think that it's like garden chives, common garden chives. And they think, oh, so this is going to seed itself everywhere. That is not the case with these perennial alliums to a degree.
No, and like I would love it if it did, but it doesn't. And I don't deadhead. I leave the seed head standing. I think they're kind of pretty. Actually, right now they're out there sticking up out of the snow. They are, good winter interest. I don't think that the birds are particularly interested in those seeds. And like you said, they don't tend to create a lot of unwanted seedlings.
No, exactly. So that's a good thing because I feel like, we all have that mindset of, oh, it's going to be like, that classic garden chive where like once you have them, you never get rid of them. No, I'd be happy. Yeah, same. Right. I have serendipity, which was also in that class of like new summer perennial alliums, just like Millennium and Summer Beauty. But yeah, I wish it would seed, but it doesn't. Unfortunately. Yeah. I will add that alliums also vole proof because my alliums are actually in the vole superhighway and they've stayed relatively vole proof. So again, onions, they don't like it. Bring it on. I love onions and garlic, so that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I have had voles eat other alliums, especially onions culinary onions.
Oh.
Because I guess they're a little sweet, but these are not. Like you said, the voles will leave these ones alone, I think.
Yay, perfect. All right, so the first plant that hopped to mind for me is a plant that I've become a quote unquote recent convert to, and that's epimedium. I always thought epimediums were pretty boring, and I think it was mostly because I just saw them as like this crunchy green ground cover that didn't really do much. But I mean, that's kind of what's amazing about them, and I've learned to love them because they really are a bomb-proof perennial. They do excellent in dry shade, which, in my humble opinion, is one of the toughest conditions to grow plants in. They are evergreen, which is hard to come by in our cold environments. And they really are beautiful when they bloom. And that's usually in early spring, late winter, some varieties, all the way into like mid-spring. So I grow several, and I decided, okay, I've talked about some of the ones that I've already grown. So I'm going to talk about one that's in a shopping cart online right now. And that's a new variety called Woodland Elf epimedium. And it zones 4B to 9. So this is a really tough plant, takes a pretty wide zonal range. 18 inches tall by 18 inches wide, has a lovely almost lance-like leaf to it that gets some stippling in the early spring when the new foliage starts to push. So it's a Kelly green color most of the time, but it has this lovely burgundy mottling along the leaves, which is kind of interesting for early season. But this new variety is part of the Walters Gardens breeding program, where what they've tried to do is A, increase the volume of flowers that you get on your epimediums, and B, make those to be longer stems so that, kind of star-shaped clusters of airy blossoms really float above the foliage so they're not buried in that lovely green ground cover. So Woodland Elf is a larger flower. It kind of looks like a turkey foot or a spur, and it's a lightish butter yellow with a kind of creamier center to it. The flowers start in mid-spring, so this is one of the later to bloom epimediums too, and which is good because then I'm out in the garden more. The ones that start in February sometimes are buried in snow, so I won't be able to see them. So this is one that blooms a little later, and also was bred to have a longer bloom time too. So they're claiming up to about 4 weeks on this one. So I love that. It'll transition me right up and through my daffodil season, which it reminds me of that same color scheme too. So I just I love epimediums for all of those reasons, but because they have this crunchy, hard foliage, the deer walk right past it. And it's a woodland plant, so I have it on a lot of like the shady edges of my property that go right into the woodland where the deer live. So they trot right by. They take out my ferns left and right, but they do not touch the epimedium. So I would say that that's a pretty good testament to how deer-proof they are. This is speculation completely that it's because it's a very crunchy, unappetizing foliage, but I think that has a lot to do with why the deer leave epimediums alone. Over time, they mass out. They kind of make a thicket. It is not an aggressive plant. You actually will probably wish that it spread a little more readily into that area that you plant it, but it's just a bang up plant. So Woodland Elf is in my shopping cart. I have several other varieties that I've planted in the past, but you guys have already heard about that. So this is a new one for you. All right, Carol. Carol, do you grow epimediums?
I had Lila Fee, and I tried moving it, and then there was some forestry that occurred by my husband, and he stood on it when he was like cutting a tree down, and then there was all this sun, and it was just like that was it for Lila Fee. I think of epimediums as like a Georgia O'Keeffe flower, like you have to get really close, and then they're like amazing.
Yeah, almost orchid-like, terrestrial orchid-like. They are very cool right up close. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Well, so let's move on to happier news, not your dead epimedium. What was that plant that's still kicking it in your deer resistant garden?
Okay, I'm going to go for a keystone species, and that is
Nice.
eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana, zones 2 to 9. And seriously, zone 2, folks, like it'll grow anywhere. As I mentioned, keystone species serves as a pioneer species in disturbed landscapes. And the thing that makes it deer resistant is its texture. So it has mature foliage that is flatter or rounded, pointed on the needles. They're circular, but new growth, young growth is flatter, very, very pointed and prickly.
Yeah, if you've ever tried to prune a juniper, good luck.
Don't bother. Just stay away. It'll hurt you. It can grow 30 to 65 feet tall, 10 to 25 feet wide. I think that the plants I have were seedlings from the neighbors who had like a 40-foot one that was taken down a few years ago, but these seedlings popped up in mulch. They might have ridden in the mulch, like seeds in the mulch, or a bird might have eaten them somewhere, anywhere, not necessarily the neighbor's tree, and planted it for me. But in any event, if you see these popping up as volunteers, they're very easy to move for the first 5 years probably. And that's what I did. I moved it to a spot in the landscape where it sort of serves as like a backdrop. And it was hard for me to find photos for the show notes that featured it. So the closest I could come is you can see it as a background plant behind my Amethyst Falls wisteria, and I had, another year I had zinnias in front of it, but it's just like this pretty medium green texture. It's the same color like 3 seasons out of the year. In winter it goes not bronze but almost black, like really dark the colder it gets. Very, very, very unfussy. It's got a huge native range. It likes full sun, dry to average soil. It's dioecious, which means that it has separate male and female plants. I don't know which gender mine is yet.
You didn't look underneath the branches to tell?
My juniper is a they, them for the time being, but you'll know if it's a female, it'll start making berries at some point, and if it's a male, it won't. So I suspect mine's a male, but we'll see. It prefers moist soils in its native habitat, but it is intolerant of consistently wet soil. So that's like the only, not even fussy thing, but the only thing it's kind of particular about. It has the best drought tolerance, though, of any conifer native to the eastern U.S. Like the western U.S. has lots of drought tolerant conifers, but we don't have very many. So that's a good thing for us. This morning, so I didn't have very many photos of it. So this morning I strapped on my skis and went out to take a picture of it. And I discovered deer tracks around it. And they've been browsing the older growth. So it's not that they won't eat it. They certainly can. But at this point, we've had couple feet of snow on the ground for many weeks. There's not much else that they can eat right now. So, I don't mind. It's the giving tree for the deer this time of year. The rest of the time of the year, they will leave it alone, and they really can't kill it. They're stripping that older growth, but they're not breaking the main branches or anything like that. So I'm not mad, but I also want, this is to our point that nothing is truly deer proof. It is, but this is very deer resistant.
And you said it. We are in an extreme condition right now. We've had feet, not inches, of snow on the ground for a very long period of time. It's very cold. We've had quite the winter. So, the fact that this is the worst case scenario, right? And they're not mauling it, they're just browsing it. So
they're stripping the foliage that's easy to get to, leaving the rest of it alone, moving on. This is how nature works, I guess.
Yeah. I have friends of mine who live in a deer area, and we're looking for a screening plant to use between them and their neighbors. And because they have so many deer, and because it's an area that is in full sun with really crappy backfill soil, I had recommended this juniper for them to use. And that was several years ago. They've sized up nicely. You can't see the neighbors anymore. And it has ended up being a really, really nice screening plant. So used in that application too, it's just a nice native alternative that's also deer proof.
Yeah. And it stays nice and narrow, which is nice for like property boundaries or whatever. It gets 30 to 65 feet tall, but only 10 to 25 feet wide.
Yeah. So, I mean, think about it. I mean, as you drive through neighborhoods and you see rows and rows and rows of arborvitaes, this is a far better choice, in my humble opinion, than rows and rows and rows of arborvitaes that end up looking like little rocket ships because the deer eat the heck out of them for the first
hourglasses.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. No, good choice. Hey, I want to ask you, you mentioned a pioneer species. What do you mean by pioneer species?
So if there is, clearing by humans or forest fire is a good example, and there's open area, this is one of the first species that'll seed in and, and sort of start, creating that next generation of growth. And a place that I've seen it, which is kind of cool, is along railroad tracks that aren't very much used because they've got that opening for the sun that they need. But they're very slow growing compared to a lot of deciduous trees. Mm-hmm. And so you do need to make sure that they don't get shaded out. That's one thing that will, they really can't thrive in shade.
Gotcha. So interesting, because I knew keystone species, but pioneer species was a new one for me. I love it. This is why we do this podcast, to educate me. Well, I'm going to hop on your bandwagon of junipers because if there was ever a deer-proof plant, I would say junipers fall pretty close to that definition for all the reasons that you just said. I went with a prostrate juniper instead, which is Juniperus horizontalis, which is a native to the U.S. as well, eastern and then up into the mountain states, so cold areas, zones 2B to 3 to 9, so a large zonal range. There's a bunch of creeping junipers out there. I think a lot of people tend to go, ew, that's a parking lot plant, because they're planted in mass in a lot of parking lots, different varieties, different cultivars, because they're tough. They're really, really tough. Salt, reflected heat, full sun, poor soil, all the things. Well, also all the things is deer. They are very deer resistant. I went with Limeglow, which to me is the nativar version of Dobbs Frosted, which is a Juniperus chinensis. I love Dobbs Frosted. I have it planted in my garden. It's not a native, so when I went to go kind of repeat that element in another area of the garden, I went to Limeglow because it's very similar in appearance to Dobbs Frosted, but it was a native. So I just wanted to lean in a little bit more to the natives, and a beautiful specimen that doesn't get too tall, 1 to 2.5 feet tall and wide, depending on how happy it is in its conditions. I already said full sun, poor soil, really, really well draining soil. The death of a juniper is if you have it in standing water. That'll be the end of it. You'll get disease will set in. It will have a lot of mold issues, so you don't want that. But this Limeglow is so beautiful because in spring, the new growth that it pushes out, and the new growth is real prickly still, not soft and tender, so the deer don't browse it, is almost like a lemon lime yellow. And then it eventually fades to kind of a chartreuse, more of a chartreuse green. I also love in winter that this juniper that has almost a purpley metallic hue that takes over. Some people call it bronze. I really don't think it's bronze. Bronze to me has like, almost orange overtones. This is more cool. This is definitely more purpley metallic. It would look, I just thought of this. It would look beautiful with like heavy metal. The ornamental panicum, that's heavy metal. What a beautiful like combo that would be. I might have to put that in my shopping cart. So it's just a really, really great shrub. Now, this is not completely, ground covery juniper, only a few inches. This almost has more of like a fan-like habit to it. So it's, the main juniper trunk stem, and then kind of almost as if it was eagle wings, spreads out into this flat topped, I already said, almost up to 2 feet. Really, really beautiful, great for erosion control, no insects, no disease unless it gets molds from lack of well-drained soil, but really just a really cool plant, and the deer trot right past. I have this down towards the end of our driveway, and I'm in a rural location, and we will see deer using our driveway as they're cut through, just staying on their side of the lane, I guess, but they will trot right past this juniper, even when it was smaller, because I did purchase this, I think, as a 1 or 2 gallon plant. So they really left it alone even in its infancy. Now it's big. Now they couldn't take it out if they tried. But so Limeglow, creeping juniper, lovely nativar, and a great addition to a full sun location that sees a lot of visitation from deer. Alrighty, my dear, what is next on your list for deer-resistant plants?
So I thought I'd go for another perennial, and this is one that I have never seen the deer bother, and again, it's right out there where they totally could assault it if they wanted to. It is a smooth ironweed, also called common ironweed or prairie ironweed, and that is Vernonia fasciculata. I'm not sure. Zones 4 to 9. And this is a species that is native to the central and southern United States on both sides of the Mississippi. So if you can think of like Ohio over to Nebraska and then down south to Texas and Alabama, it's like, sort of the big block in the middle of the United States. That's its native range. I ordered this one in 2003 as plugs, and it has established very quickly. It grows 3 to 4 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet wide. It didn't bloom in year 1, but it did bloom in year 2. And it blooms from July to September, thereabouts. So it's a really long bloom period, and sort of classic amethyst purple flowers that ironweed generally will have, like full sun, average to wet soil. And in nature, you'll find it mostly growing as a wetland plant. Mm-hmm. So it's good for a rain garden because it can totally take periodic periods of wet soil. And I can testify that it can also take long periods of drought because that is the situation. And certainly last summer that we've had, but I planted this in 2023, so it's 3 years, and we've had some very, very dry, long stretches of dry weather, if not full drought. Butterflies love the flowers. Monarchs especially will hang out on it. Missouri Botanic Garden, who we use them a lot, their plant guide for reference, and they call it unexceptional. They say that.
What?
I know, right?
The nerve.
I ask you. They said toughness and the pretty flowers notwithstanding, it's an unexceptional
Notwithstanding, gorgeous flowers, and it's tough. What else do you want it to tap dance?
Right? It's
all right, Moba. We have a bone to pick with you.
Kind of harsh. But I love those flowers. And I think they look amazing with anything that's sort of in the orange and yellow range because the complementary color. So I have it out there with coreopsis. I have an echinacea that's got a beautiful yellow, I think it's called yellow ombre, but it's got like, golden yellow that really sets off those purple flowers. I leave the seed heads on. Self-sowing, again, for this one's rather unlikely, but I have a better chance because I have a natural wetland that is nearby. And I thought it would be very cool if it would sort of naturally seed into that wetland. It hasn't happened yet. Okay. But yeah, I think it's not as tall or as big as some of the other ironweeds, but I think it's a good choice if you love that color and you want it on sort of a more compact plant.
That's so good. I always think about, because Richard Honkey from the Chicago Botanic Garden did a trial result article for us years and years ago. And the deck of that article, it was something about ironweeds, whatever. And it was the superhero of fall, basically. And it really is. I mean, it is very remarkable, not unremarkable, all the different species of ironweed, because they are so tough. They take, very wet conditions, then all the way into drought. They put on a show for the pollinators in the later, months of summer and into the beginning of fall. So yeah, I love it. They are a superhero plant. And good point that this is a more compact ironweed, because I think a lot of people are intimidated by the ones that get, no joke, 6 to 7 feet tall. So this is a much better option. So I love it. I love it. I went for a perennial too, which is shocking because honestly, I just wanted to do all shrubs because that's me. But I went for a geranium, and I feel like geraniums pretty much across the board, perennial geraniums are deer resistant. Now, these are not deer proof. I do have some browsing on some of my perennial geraniums, especially in the early spring when that fresh new tender shoots come out. But if you've ever, even perennial geraniums, just like the annual geraniums, if you ever squish those leaves, they are pungent. They are very, very pungent. So I believe that it's that fragrance, and that it's also probably that, that pungent taste that has the deer looking for something else if they've got an option. They move on in my garden pretty readily right down the road onto my Amsonias, which are lovely and ferny and green and much better to eat. So, I grow several different types. I fell in love with a geranium that I saw in England last year on the Fine Gardening International Garden Tour. And I'm searching for it. I haven't found it yet in our local nurseries, but I've got it in a shopping cart online right now. Again, you can tell it's spring, right? I've got a lot of time on my hands and I'm doing a lot of online plant shopping. This is Rosemoor geranium, which is a hybrid. It's Geranium X Magnificum Rosemoor, and it's zones 5 to 8. I saw this the first time when we were over in England in Caisson Gardens. It was in a partial shade area, which I believe is really the condition that you want to grow most perennial geraniums. I think probably in the Pacific Northwest, you can give them a bit more sun, but in areas where hot sun is a factor throughout the late spring and summer, you really want it in a partial shade environment. But it was 1.5, 2 feet tall and wide, so a beefy geranium, and had this lovely mounded habit with kind of these large palmate leaves that look like little lily pads, a bit of a fuzz to the leaf, not overly so, and then the darkest purple, almost Vernonia purple, amethyst purple, lovely 5-petaled flowers that had a slight veining on them that gave it kind of this iridescent blue color, just spectacular. So for me, I thought, holy macaroni, can they just grow geraniums that much better over here in England? But it was finding out that it is this hybrid between geranium ibericum, which gives that large flower, and geranium platypedilum, which is a larger leaf and a stockier plant. So magnificum is a cross between those two geraniums. Just beautiful. I talked to the gardener there. This was on a larger estate. They have deer pressure, they have rabbit pressure, and this geranium holds its own against that. And I think part of the reason too is that it is so much bigger of a geranium that it gets going and is able to bush out far faster without getting nubbed down by the deer right in the beginning. So I just really like the idea of a bulky geranium. I grow smaller varieties that are, subsequently going to get mauled and you're going to notice a lot more. But a midsummer bloomer, 4 to 5 weeks of blooms, which is great. You can shear back if you want to, and you'll get more flowers. This is a sterile hybrid, so it doesn't, unsolicitously procreate all around the garden. So you're not going to be seeing little seedlings pop up here, there, and everywhere. But really, really lovely plant if you've got a good partial shade environment with some moist, well-drained soil. Perennial geraniums are where it's at, and this Rosemoor is quite a beauty. All right, bring it on home, Carol, our fourth and final deer-resistant plant.
Okay, so this is a shopping cart plant. This is one of those ones that I was reading the article, through editorial review, and I took a break and put this in my shopping cart.
Occupational hazard.
Totally. And also, like this little preview, we're going to be featuring poppies in our big spring issue, which is a 100-page issue. It'll be on newsstands and in your home in early April. So my favorite from that article is Champagne Bubbles Mix Icelandic Poppy.
I mean, what's not to like? Champagne, check. Bubbles, hooray. Iceland, I mean, that's a beautiful country. Yes, all right, love it.
Absolutely. So this one, it used to be Papaver nudical. It is now called, I remember it because it has Oreo in the name. It's Oreomicon nudicalis. And it is super cold hardy, zones 2 to 7, but it is not especially perennial. So that's the caveat. You really need to kind of grow it as an annual, probably need to seed every year, make new plants every year. This was reclassified into the Oreomicon in 2021. So almost everywhere you're still going to see it as Papaver, which is what we all think of as poppies. And it's such the colors. That's what makes this special, this mix special. So you can get the individual colors of Champagne Bubbles Icelandic Poppy separately. And they are, we've got a lot of oranges, yellows, white, red to pink. And those are the main colors. And I think that the flowers sort of, maybe go through a little bit of a color change from the time they open until the time that the petals drop off. The flowers, it takes about 100 days from the time you plant the seed until the time you get the first flower. So it's very helpful. That's almost, that's more than 3 months. So it's very helpful if you start it indoors 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost, because it wants to be doing most of its growing in cooler weather. It really does not, it's from Iceland. It does not love hot summer weather. But if you start it in like a 128 tray, plug tray, which, really small cells, because the seeds are tiny. Think of poppy seeds there. These are poppy seeds, very small, but you can get those little plants going so that by the time, just after your last frost is passed, you can get them out into the garden. You're hopefully going to be getting flowers very late spring to early summer.
That's pretty fast, though. If you think about it, that's pretty fast from a teeny tiny, big old poppy seed to flowering. I mean,
Exactly.
that's quick.
And I think of it as kind of a gap filler because it should start flowering before a lot of the other later blooming annuals like zinnias and dahlias and that kind of thing that will give you lots of color later in the summer, but this will give you that color a little bit earlier before the perennials really get going. It has, they're single. And they're sort of got that beautiful crepe paper look to them. And the centers are this beautiful, like golden centers. That's just another color in that color profile. And the stems are hairy and the foliage is hairy. So that's kind of what keep the deer off from it. And I think also it might be slightly poisonous. I think most poppies are, at least bitter so that the deer will find other things. So they'll be eating the neighbor's arbor vitae before they're eating this.
Nice.
So yeah, this is great for some good late spring to early summer color. But with a caveat, if your summers don't heat up too fast. If they do, if you're in the South, you can grow this over the winter. And it will, as long as it's not too cold over the winter, or if you're, who has a high tunnel out here, not me, but like if you have a high tunnel, you could start it in October in the high tunnel and it'll start flowering in like April.
Oh, beautiful.
I watched a video about this from a well-known seed producer that caters to market growers. So if, but for wedding flowers, imagine it in wedding bouquets. It would be so pretty.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Just because they are so delicate.
Yeah.
Like just so that papery was great way to describe it. So pretty. I love it. So, Carol, as far as would you recommend, so you'd want to, could you collect seed, do you think, from these and then resow? So once you have a healthy crop and have purchased them up front, it would be a good candidate for collection, or no?
I think most poppies, you can definitely collect them.
Okay.
They recommend for this one, again, starting it indoors rather than direct sowing. There are a lot of poppies, you can just throw them down on the snow.
Yeah.
And they'll come up. But this one needs a little bit more prep time, if you will.
Okay.
So, but it has, it's described as having good hybrid vigor. And so it's not open pollinated. And so that's something to keep in mind. And so if you want that vigor and you want that control over the colors, I would suggest purchasing seed each year. But if you want to save money and just see what you get, by all means, I think you could start seed that you collect yourself.
So cool. I mean, yeah, and has a delicate look, so you wouldn't think that it's deer resistant, but because of that hairiness, they avoid it. That's awesome. All right, well, I went back to my roots for my last plant, and I decided to choose a shrub. I know you're shocked. I went with dwarf fothergilla. Is everybody not growing fothergilla? If you're not growing fothergilla, can you put a fothergilla in your online shopping cart or put it on your shopping list for the local garden center today? It is an amazing shrub. It is so amazing. This is fothergilla gardeniae. I went with the dwarf, something that stays a little bit smaller. There are other species. It's a native. You can find species that get a lot bigger if you want to. It's in the witch hazel family. So that gives you an idea of what you can kind of expect as far as the leaf is concerned. The leaves look like, they look like green Ruffles potato chips. That's exactly what they look like. So it gives you a really nice, kind of ridged leaf to it, which is cool, and it's got cool texture. I think it's got a little bit of hair on those leaves. That's probably why the deer avoid it. Also, deer tend to avoid witch hazels. I think it's that pungent astringentness to it, which they develop into antiseptic that you can use medicinally. But fothergilla, all right, let's talk about it. This dwarf fothergilla is zones 5 to 8. It has this beautiful structure in winter, the off season, because it's a 4-season shrub that is silvery bark to it, which is just, it's gorgeous. It looks like a sparkly little ghost shrub out there, and it's got some good, like, dense habit, so it doesn't flap all over the place or anything. Stays really nice and rounded, about eventually 3 feet by 3 feet, 2.5 by 2.5, something like that. Okay, then early in the season, you're like, oh no, the pollinators, they don't have anything to eat. Well, no. If you have a fothergilla, it throws out these bottle brush white flowers all over it. Looks like those brushes in the car wash. Looks like those, only the white version, and it's on this shrub, and they smell like honey. So the thing gets totally covered in all sorts of parasitic wasps, bees, any little pollinator, and it's just a hive of activity. Amazing. Okay, then the potato chip leaves come out. Cool. How cool is that? Texture, amazing. Yeah, it's green, but whatever. Then in fall, swear to God, looks like you lit this shrub on fire because it's bright red, it's orange, it's yellow, it's all the colors. Who needs a burning bush? You don't need a burning bush. This shrub has way better color, and it's a native, not an invasive. Plant this shrub. It's so awesome. Okay, all of that, and the deer avoid it. So you could put this shrub down by the mailbox. You could put this shrub right on the deer path. You could put this shrub anywhere, and it's going to do well. Okay, caveats, not anywhere. It needs well-drained soil. This is not a plant that you're going to be sticking into clay soil. It doesn't do well. It really resents clay soil. It likes full sun to partial shade. Deep dark shade, not going to happen. It'll struggle along. It'll limp along. Trust me, I tried it. Doesn't really put on a good bloom show in that environment either. Acidic soil, bonus. It will grow outside of that acidic soil zone, but it prefers that, which makes sense because it is a southeastern native. So it likes those typical southeastern conditions. But this is just a cool shrub. You should be growing this shrub if you're not. There are other native species to the western half of the United States of fothergilla. Look it up, plant it, give the deer the finger, and call it a day. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about deer and other things in the garden that annoy him.
Good afternoon, everyone. Peter here, your resident Englishman from New England, coming to you live from the garden, where tranquility goes to die. Now, I've been asked to speak about the most annoying garden pests. Besides deer, obviously. We've all agreed that the deer are too obvious, like blaming gravity for falling over. No, today I want to talk about the lesser-known menaces, the ones that smile at you while committing horticultural crimes. Let's begin underground, where the voles live. Voracious voles, absolute mousy criminals. You plant something lovely, perhaps a tulip bulb, perhaps a hope for the future, and the voles say, "Ah, yes, thank you, I'll have that." They don't nibble, they commit. You wake up to a garden that looks fine but feels emotionally hollow, like someone's eaten all the chocolate and left the wrappers. Then there's our cat, a creature we feed, shelter, and speak to kindly. A creature who, in return, has decided that certain areas of the garden are, how shall I put this, a lavatory with landscaping. We've tried everything, repellents, fencing, stern conversations. But no, the cat locks eyes with you while doing it. It's not about hygiene, it's about power. And finally, now I say this with love, the neighbours' children. They're delightful, cherubic, polite, and currently learning to play football. Soccer. I live here now, I must try to assimilate. Anyway, their practice ball seems to have a fascinating relationship with my wife's zinnias. Specifically, it finds them, repeatedly, with great accuracy. Nothing quite captures suburban life like hearing a thump, followed by a small voice yelling, "Sorry," while you survey what used to be a flower and is now more of a concept. So yes, voles below, cat within, soccer above, a full ecosystem of irritation. But in a way that's gardening, isn't it? You plant beauty, you nurture hope, and then the universe drop kicks a ball through your zinnias. Still, could be worse. Could be deer.
Did Peter say that he's annoyed by his next door neighbor's little kids?
Oh, I hope they're not listening.
If you're listeners, he didn't mean it. He didn't mean it.
He meant the other neighbor on the other side.
Exactly. Speaking of neighbors, our expert this episode is making her debut and is our former office neighbor and colleague, Diana. Diana came. Our content editor is our expert testimony. That's exciting.
Very exciting.
All right. Well, so we've begged, we've borrowed, we've stolen, we have pleaded with this expert to be on our podcast more times than I can count. Expert guest, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, it's nice to be on the podcast finally. I'm Diana Kame. I'm the content editor here at Fine Gardening.
Hooray! We finally got every editor involved.
Yes.
Welcome, Diana. So excited to have you. This was your topic. Like, you had to be the one to do this expert guest testimony on the podcast because of the past probably 4 to 5 years, every deer resistant article that we have done, you have been the editor of. Is that an accurate portrayal?
Yes, definitely a few of them by now.
Well, and so you've picked up on a few favorite plants from those articles, correct?
Oh, yeah. There's been a few dozen, and I've had a few that have been like all-star performers that I've definitely loved.
And now, do you battle deer in your garden?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in Connecticut, and it's a suburban area, definitely a lot of deer.
And your dog does not scare them away on a regular enough basis?
No, she like throws herself at the window barking, but they're not very phased at all.
We have particularly nonplussed deer here in Connecticut. They roam by the droves, herds and herds of deer. So I feel like we're pretty good to talk about deer-resistant plants because, yeah, we fight them constantly. So when I begged, borrowed, and pleaded with you to be on the podcast, what was the first plant that came to mind?
Well, I was thinking about hollies because most hollies are pretty deer-resistant. And we have a few native hollies, but I really liked one that Susan Cohen picked out for her article, which was Ilex opaca Cedar Hill. And that's zone 5 to 8. And I really like this one because it's kind of the best of both worlds between like, when I think of like winterberry as a classic native holly and then like the classic Ilex aquifolium English holly, it's kind of like in between those for me because like winterberry, it's deer resistant, although even more so because it's got the spiky leaves. And it's got wildlife value. The birds love the berries. But like English holly, it's evergreen, so it has that element. And I think it looks pretty close to English holly, more so than the species, because the leaves are a lot glossier.
Oh, okay.
And it almost looks exactly like those like holiday holly boughs that you'd get from English holly.
Like the classic.
Yeah, the classic. And the form is way better for gardens than the species. It only gets about 30 to 35 feet tall, and it's got this beautiful pyramidal shape, unlike the species, which can get just absolutely enormous. But it also takes to pruning well, so you can kind of put it into a different shape if you like. And it's also hardy to zone 5, which is a lot nicer than some non-native hollies.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And, I feel like because it's an Ilex opaca, like, no offense to our Native American holly, but it usually has that kind of dull green leaf to it. But this has a much almost, well, you said glossy and brighter and just more attractive.
I've seen it in person, and some people will kind of argue about how much different it looks than the species leaves, but I think it's a lot glossier.
Well, that's perfect, because this is Let's Argue About Plants, so this is perfect right here. Argue away, listeners. If you think it's not as glossy, you write us in right now. I love that you picked a holly, too. You picked an evergreen, especially because, look outside right now, our windows, we've talked about it. There's about 2 feet of snow on the ground. The deer pressure is immense right now. So to have an evergreen that's looking good and is standing up against that deer pressure is a big factor. And yeah, I wouldn't want to be a deer and try and eat this plant because it literally is covered in spikes all the way around the leaves. Talk about indigestion.
Definitely.
So, what was your next plant that just rose to the top? Because I limited you to 3, even though you had dozens.
You did. So I wanted to talk about purple coneflowers, Echinacea purpurea, because they're, like, in general, they're pretty deer resistant as a native plant. But, you know, there's so many different cultivars, and Karen Chapman in her article had actually pegged this as a daylily replacement, which, you know, of course are like deer food, specifically because of how many different flower colors you can get from coneflower. And despite the fact that I just said they're very colorful, I'm going with one that's just purple. And
you like a classic. You like a classic.
Yeah, exactly, because Powwow Wild Berry, which is the one I'm going with here, which is zones 3 to 8, I like it because it's basically just the species on steroids. Like, it looks so much like the classic native species, but it's just better in every way as a garden plant. So it looks much better by the end of summer, which you know that, like, purple coneflowers, they get faded, they flop over, they don't bloom consistently as super long as this cultivar does. And this has a much brighter color, a much better habit. You know, it's more compact. It's a little bit shorter, way more floriferous with just way more flowers per plant. And the blooms don't, like, fade into that washed out purple color. Nice. So I think if you want a coneflower, a purple coneflower, this is just like a great one and a great substitute for, you know, the native species.
The stray species. So you said it stays more compact. How big does Powwow? And this is, and say the cultivar again.
Powwow Wild Berry. The actual cultivar name is just a series of numbers and letters, which I don't know off the top of my head.
We do not need that. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. So how big does Powwow Wild Berry get if it's a little more compact?
I think it only gets around 2 to 3 feet tall. Okay. Yeah, so it is smaller.
Nice. Yeah. So less flopping and such. And you nailed it with, you know, one of my big, I don't know, pet peeves about anything in the Echinacea family that is in the purple, you know, like Magnus, Echinacea Magnus is a cultivar classic. It bleaches out. It's like it forgot to wear its sunblock or something. So as soon as you get, like, partially through the summer, it's just this washed out, like, dirty tissue color. It's gross. I like that this one doesn't do that at all. And so it's worth saying, because you were talking about how echinaceas in general tend to be deer resistant. We've already talked earlier in the episode about deer proof. There's no such thing, but deer resistant. But they're hairy, right? Echinacea, the stems and the leaves and such.
Which is one of the reasons that's common that deer avoid plants, is the bad texture. Like with the holly being spiky, this one being hairy.
Yeah. All right. I love it. And unexpected. That was an unexpected pick from you. I'm surprised by that one. I really am. Okay. So bring it on home. It was like the 11th hour. It was the final inning. I'm just going to keep throwing out different scenarios here. And you had to pick one more. Which last and final plant did you land on?
Well, I was thinking, we're talking about deer resistance. I have to give a substitute for hostas, since they're just...
Oh, well done. Well
Number
done,
one
ma'am.
Deer food. And, you know, everything loves hostas, deer, rabbits, slugs. And actually, you know, I was talking with one of my authors who said he had ducks, and even his ducks, when they're in his garden, go straight for the hostas and, like, nibble them all to the ground. So.
What? It's like prime rib to everything.
It's like filet mignon for, like, insects, animals of all kinds. So I picked Hatspin Cream Brunnera, which is Brunnera macrophylla. And this one is zones 3 to 7. And again, I picked this just because I thought it was a great substitute for hostas, especially this cultivar, because it's got that great variegation with the stripe in the middle that looks just to me, a lot like variegated hostas. And it's also a shade plant, just like hostas. And it makes a great ground cover spreading by rhizomes. But, this is one of the classic things that people hate about Brunnera is just like it spreads around and people will say it's so thuggish. This one is a much slower grower than the straight species. It does spread by seed a little in the garden, but a lot of people will deadhead this one because the seedlings don't come true to type often. So if you want to keep that variegation, you will want to maybe pull up the seedlings or deadhead a little bit. And that also would keep it from spreading around as much. This one can be occasionally damaged by slugs, but not as bad as hostas, which of course is like we said, prime rib for slugs.
Yes. And the leaves are quite large, even though this is a variegated form of Brunnera, so it is slower growing and a little less, rigorous, but still a big leaf, right?
Yeah, a big heart-shaped leaf, which leaves are like the prime reason that people grow hostas. So the foliage is really nice, large, and spreads around, makes a good like mounded ground cover.
And how big would you say each of the plants gets, Diana? Because I'm thinking standard Brunnera macrophylla, 3 feet by 3 feet. That this doesn't get that big, right?
No, it doesn't. I would say around 1 to 1.5 feet tall and maybe like 2 feet wide.
Nice.
Max.
Nice. Beautiful. And you didn't mention, I know we grow this for the foliage, but it does flower.
Yes, and it, obviously we all know it looks just like forget-me-nots, which, it's better than forget-me-nots because forget-me-nots are really starting to become like on official invasive lists.
Yeah. So this gives you that beautiful like cobalt blue flower that is so iconic of the forget-me-not, but without the invasive nature.
Yes.
That's amazing. So, a good shade plant as well, which I think can be especially tough for people to find, wooded edges, wooded property edges, that sort of thing. So this is a good plant with that. And we'll take some dry shade. No, it likes a moist, well-drained soil. What kind of soil are we looking at?
Well-drained soil, but it doesn't have to be super moist, I don't think.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's a little bit variable in what it can take.
That's so good. You hit the trifecta, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
I mean, you got a great evergreen. Amazing.
Yes.
And say the hollies cultivar again.
Cedar Hill.
Cedar Hill, a holly, American holly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got like a beautiful echinacea that doesn't end up looking like dirty tissues by midsummer. Powwow wildberry, right? And then a great shade plant to round it all out. I think you pretty much nailed it, Diana. You're just going to have to come back.
I was thinking I have to do an arborvitae substitute since we're talking about deer, but then I was like, you could just use the holly for screening.
There you go. I love it. I love it. So there you go. You gave a substitute for every deer food too.
Yes.
That's a major deer food. Amazing. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. Would you do it again?
Sure. Anytime you want to have me.
Thanks so much, Diana.
Okay.
So I felt like Diana was the perfect person to speak to this because I feel like if we had a deer-resistant plant article in the last probably 4 years, she was the editor on that article. So she obviously got some good ideas from those articles.
Absolutely. And she lives not too far from me, and it might be some of the same deer that are in her backyard. Who knows?
You guys are presenting a united front of pushing deer away with their choices in your gardens. I love it.